In our fast and furious news cycle, with so many historic moments of upheaval and anxiety covered every day, in the middle of this past week came a report that was different from all the rest. Instead of division and despair, it noted that the current Pope said supportive words about the LGBTQ community. They are children of God and have a right to a family, Pope Francis is reported to have said. Nobody should be thrown out or made miserable because of it. He continued, what we have to create is a civil union law. That way, they're legally covered. This was met instantly with backlash from both conservatives who railed at what they saw as a betrayal of church doctrine, including Father Gerald Murray of New York, who said Pope Francis has overstepped his bounds. And backlash from liberals. Too little, too late. You may ask, why am I speaking about the Pope in shul on Shabbos? And why this particular issue? After all, haven't we here on this bima long ago resolved that we stand with our LGBTQ family, colleagues, community members, and friends? I'm speaking now because the Pope's position is, more often than we think, our position. He didn't need to speak up. Nobody expected him to do that. He could have said nothing or equivocated, and no one would have batted an eye. Moreover, he must have known that if he did say something, it would open him up to just the criticism that he received from the very members of his community who hold different beliefs. He could have stayed quiet, cloistered. He could have said, it's too hard. It's not the right time. It's not worth it. And that's an option for each of us, too. We can, especially now, stay cloistered. We can stay quiet about the suffering of others, stay on the sideline of the injustice that rages outside, focusing only what is in front of us day to day. But with his words, the Pope opens another possibility, another path, and he does it by looking again at his sources. All religious traditions with deep and ancient sources have texts that are both accepted with long-term, long-standing interpretations and also have a flexibility that lies in the relative weight that is put on one teaching versus another. It's particularly noteworthy that the Pope's comments made the news this week because our Parsha is a perfect example of exactly this. As heteronormative texts go, the story that we read this morning of Noah is up near the top. In fact, conservative religious groups often point to the repeated assertion that pairs are male and female to make their case. If Bereshit, Adam and Eve, are source number one for the claim that God defines partnership as heterosexual partnership, all the male and female and two-by-two-ness of the ark is a very close second. Repeatedly, the ark is boarded, ish ve'ishto, male and his female mate. And when God speaks to Noah, it is ata ve'ishtecha, you and your wife, your sons and their wives. And for generations, this was accepted truth. Pairs mean male and female matched sets. God's plan is explicit. Until our generation, when it became clear to many of us that this reading of the natural order of our world failed to take into account the sacred souls of beloved members of our community, of our extended family, and our children who don't find themselves drawn to the opposite gender. And we looked again. Aren't they God's children too? And so, more than a decade ago, in the conservative movement, we began a transformative process where the biblical texts that spoke explicitly to LGBTQ issues were rigid. We would use the weight of our ethical teachings from our Torah to welcome and embrace. We would leverage the compassion of our whole tradition to outweigh the exclusion of particular pieces of challenging text. We are all created B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God outweighs thou shalt not. Love is love, is love, is love. This expansive read, though, has for the most part been a liberal move, often limited to the left, both politically and religiously. When the Pope came out with his affirmation, he claimed this move for conservatives too. Compassion over canon. That's particularly important now, when extremist hatred has become the rallying cry of so many across the globe, at a time when there are so-called LGBTQ-free zones where discriminatory laws and restrictions are rising up in Catholic countries like Poland, at a time when legal protections are being challenged in our own country. To that unchecked menace, the Pope's words are a corrective. As the Wall Street Journal shares, Reverend James Martin wrote, Pope Francis's support for same-sex civil unions sends a strong signal to countries where the church has opposed such laws. The power of this move extends far beyond the immediate issue to the capacity that we all need to cultivate to see and stand for those who not only love differently, but live differently. In an interesting coda to Noah's Ark, after the world is destroyed, its rebuilders make a catastrophic mistake through their zealousness. Rabbi Danny Gordis points out a strange detail in the story of the Tower of Babel. We would expect that the fact that everyone was working together as one uniform community to be a good thing, an ideal. We read the dispersion at the end of the story as a punishment. But Rabbi Gordis argues that difference and variability in look, language, and living is not a flaw. It is the plan. God's world and God's word only flourish when the full rainbow of human experience is expressed in our communities and beyond. That is true for LGBTQ rights, and it is true for all human rights. To oppress another because you believe the world should be all one way is to create a Tower of Babel, a foundational breach in our world. The Pope's words embody a different path. Of course, the statement made international news because Catholic doctrine has been, for as long as anyone can remember, firmly against same-sex unions of any kind. But what's more, the Pope's words are not only a reversal of church doctrine, but of the Pope's own public teaching from as recently as 2016, when he wrote, "There are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar or remotely analogous to God's plan for marriage and family." And while there have been some clues that Pope Francis may have become perhaps open to a softer stance, his public position and his community has been clear. That conversation is closed. at a time when not only LGBTQ marriage, but adoption is rejected by conservative communities around the world, Pope Francis's words affirming family model a willingness to see others where they are, even if it challenges you. The ability to examine and re-examine your own strongly held convictions and the courage to challenge yourself each new day is an attribute we are desperately in need of in our world today. Seeing that, each of us are obligated to ask ourselves, what are the issues we need to revisit and re-examine? Which leads me back to my own previously held idea. I posited that Noah is an aggressively heteronormative text. But then I read again. It's true that the people and animals go on the ark, male and female, 2 by 2. But actually, God's original call to the ark is kol beitecha, all of your household. And they go out of the ark as a family. Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Noah is not about ideal partnerships. It is about family. Family whose strength is not who they exclude, but who they embrace. Family who weathers trauma together and comes out charged with building a different kind of world. That is our task today and every day. We are not the Pope, but there are truths we must speak and people we must stand for. We are not Noah, but there are traumas to travail and a world that continues to need our hands. What kind of a world will we build now? Shabbat Shalom.